Is it filming?
Hey everybody, welcome to the prop shop. Just kidding, it's not a prop shop. So as some of you know, I've been making Captain America shields, and I decided I wanted to show you all how I make them.
Yeah, that's right. One of these.
So you guys are definitely showing some interest in my shields, and thank you for that. And I've been making several, and it's really cool. I've been getting better at making them. So I decided to show a video on how I make them and the process that goes into it. As you will see, some of the work involved is a pain in the butt, so yeah, it's not fun. Anyways, let's get into this. So to start with, I use a flexible flyer metal saucer sled. You can pick them at Walmart or buy them online. Home Depot or Walmart are the cheapest. And these things are the perfect size. They're roughly 26 inches in diameter, but once you cut that rim off, it's going to drop down to being about 24, 25, which is still like the perfect width. So what I start out by doing is stripping the paint off. And this, my friends, is where the work gets difficult. Now, what I did is I started out stripping it after cutting the rim off, but that's actually a bad idea because then it's a lot more flexible. So what I did is I started by sanding it and stripping it before I cut the rim off. It is so stinking hard. The paint stripper doesn't always work. I've tried 3 or 4 different brands, but I have discovered that the best tool is this awesome thing. It takes the paint right off. But in other instances, I've just used a regular old sander with 120 grit sandpaper, and that seemed to do the job pretty good too. And then the next step is what I use is Scotch-Brite pads, and I use this little leather pattern that I created, and I spin it around in a circle. This is after finding the center and drilling a pilot hole, and it creates an awesome brushed look, which is essential to making a really awesome realistic shield. Of course, I usually do this before I cut the rim off. Now to cut the rim off, I just use a simple jigsaw with a metal cutting blade, and I use that leather pattern. It actually has holes in it that I use for different measurements. I use that to find my outer rim edge, and I cut it there. And then I use a grinder, and I try to grind off all the sharp edges, as well as I buff it as much as I can so you won't cut your hand. And next, it's painting! Dun, 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 dun. So I use Duplicolor Metal Cast, and it's an awesome paint, and it has a nice transparent look to it, so you can see the brushed look through it. Now originally I had done what the instructions said and I did 5 coats, but as you can see by this picture, it's the one on the right. It's very much darker than the one on the left, and that's because of so many layers. What I learned is that if I just did 2 layers, it still was transparent and was much brighter. And then to do the battle-worn paint look, I use a blowtorch and I just heat bullet marks into it. Now I do this before I add any of the metal reinforcement to the back, just because I use JB Weld and that will give when there's too much heat in the front. So I do this first. And then after that, I just start cutting all my angle pieces that I put in the back. I use 1 1/8 wide pieces of angle iron that I just get from a hardware store. Being a carpenter for 3 years gives you a little bit of an advantage when it comes to just learning how to work with tools and angles. Yeah. And I just cut that to the right measurements and I stick it on the back. I pre-drill holes that I use for studs that I use for the straps. I countersink them for the heads and I allow them to stick through plenty for the nuts. But then what I do is I grind them off so that way they don't dig into your hand. Now just a small side note, for my double layer shields, which by the way are quite a bit heavier, but they're also very stiff and they are much more realistic. I think everybody would appreciate this more. To do that, I actually screw through the metal angle iron on the back into a separate sled. And I grind off those screws. I just simply epoxy a separate sled onto the face of that one. So trust me, this thing is pretty heavy duty. But on my regular shields, I just usually use JB Weld and some epoxy, and it goes on very well. And then after that, we just start doing battle damage. I just use some basic black paint, and I just go for it. I just add it around all the areas where it look worn, and I just go around and do that to the front and the back. And in the front, I also just add some silver dabs where it looks like the paint's starting to chip. And then one of the last things I do is I cut out a separate star, and I glue that to the front. I just take a little bit of aluminum flashing, use the Scotch-Brite to add a circular pattern just like the shield, and I just cut out a star. Use a utility knife to cut a groove out of it so that way it would have the same look. I just simply glue that onto the front, and voila. Then I just add some simple battle damage paint around that, and then I clear coat the whole thing in a matte finish. And you know, such stuff like that. Actually, not that. So, this is the finished product. And as you can see, it's pretty cool. This is my original one, so with this, it has the spray painted back, which I am not going to be doing on my other ones. You can get this magnet, and it clips very well onto your back. You know, good for costuming. And as you can probably tell with this, compared to some of the other pictures, it's a much darker color. But I still like it. Still my original. I'll hold on to it. Probably just put it up there somewhere. Maybe in a couple years or so, I can be doing this instead of working for a living. You know, that kind of thing. So go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check us out on Facebook. And thanks for watching. Dun 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 dun. Okay. Are you sure I want to switch cameras? No, I don't want to switch cameras. I want you to stop.